Hey, this is Stefan Lorenz with Lonesome BirdTours, and I'm glad you can join me, and I hope you will enjoy this brief presentation about our Colorado tour, where we go look for prairie chickens, grouse, and more, or the chicken run, as I like to call that. We've been running this tour for more than 15 years. I've been doing it for 4 or 5 years, the last 4 or 5 years, and I greatly enjoy it. It's one of the finest birding spectacles to be had in the ABA area, takes in some wonderful landscapes, and also has a lot of other wildlife to see. But of course, the grouse, the prairie chickens, the ptarmigans take the center stage on this tour. And in my humble opinion, there's no finer spectacle in terms of behavior, photography, than some of the grouse and prairie chickens we get to witness on this tour. Their antics and dances and calls and displays and plumes are just out of this world. And I would even argue they're the equivalent of the birds of paradise of North America, although some people may find that comparison a bit far-fetched. But this tour is quite legendary. It's very popular. We run it every year, sometimes 2 tours concurrently. And there are lots of rumors about this tour. I've talked to many people that haven't done it, and they've heard about early mornings, long drives, lots of coffee that's being consumed, which is very true. But I want to explain the tour a bit more in detail, maybe dispel some of those rumors and clarify a few things, but mostly just give you an overview of the amazing landscapes, birds, and other wildlife that we get to see on this tour. So let me give you an overview of the actual tour. It starts in Denver. We meet at the airport there. And then we head south to Pueblo first, and then we actually head east into Kansas. We now go to Kansas for lesser prairie chickens, which have become very difficult to see in Colorado. So we now do a little bit of Kansas. Then after one night there, we head back into Colorado to the small town of Ray. And then we head west again to Silverthorne, a beautiful town in the Rockies, skiing areas, just gorgeous landscape there. And then we head southwest to the Gunnison Basin for the famous Gunnison sage-grouse or Gunnison grouse. And then we head even further west to Grand Junction near the Utah border. It's sandstone country, arid, just a beautiful area. And then we get to the most northeastern portion of the tour, to Craig, before heading to Walden, which is our last stop of the tour. Walden is actually situated in the least populated county in Colorado, in the very north there of the state. Beautiful, empty area, lots of wilderness areas left and lots of animals. And then we complete that smaller loop by heading back to Denver. So you can see we do a figure 8 throughout the state of Colorado. The route varies a bit each year, depending on lek availability and weather, but this is roughly it. And we cover between 2,400 to 2,600 miles, which sounds like a lot, but it's really broken up into many medium length to shorter drives with many stops, many birding stops along the way. So that is the overall route right here, a nice figure 8. So we travel by comfortable 15-passenger vans. We only have 7 passengers in each, and depending on group size, we either have 2 vans or maybe another SUV if we have a group less than 14, for example. And the SUV is also great to have for luggage. So here we are actually out at the Pawnee National Grasslands in northeastern Colorado, birding the shortgrass prairies. Let me give you a brief overview of some of the landscapes we see along the way. Here again are the shortgrass prairies of eastern Colorado. And then here we go right up into the Rockies near Monarch Pass. That time of the year, we run the tour in the beginning of April, which is the prime time for grouse and prairie chickens to be displaying. There's still lots of snow in the mountains, but the roads are, of course, the major roads are open. And here's a beautiful view from Loveland Pass, a famous site for the white-tailed ptarmigan, of course. And then we also make a stop at the Black Canyon of the Gunnison National Park. It was a national monument at some point. It's been declared a national park. Just a beautiful area. And this is in the Gunnison Basin. Here's our group enjoying the view. It's a magnificent gorge or canyon, and also has a lot of interesting wildlife and birds for us to see, of course. Here we have the Colorado National Monument that's right outside of Grand Junction. near the Utah border. You can see some of that typical sandstone country, also full of special birds we don't see anywhere else on the tour. Here we're also still in far western Colorado. You can see more arid, drier habitats. So we start in Pueblo. We drive there during the first afternoon of the tour, have a welcome dinner at a local restaurant there, and then the next morning we already set out birding just a little bit west of the city. And Pueblo is right at the foothills of the Rockies, so you have a beautiful backdrop of the Rocky Mountains. But we are in southern Colorado, essentially, so we'll get a few species we don't see anywhere else. So we start with the first chicken of the tour, as I call it. I know this is not a grouse. This is, of course, a quail, the scaled quail. But near Pueblo is the only location we can find it. Beautiful patterned quail with this crest. Some of the other species we see in that area that we don't see anywhere else are things like curve-billed thrasher, their canyon towhees, and overall it's a great introduction to birding in Colorado. As we head east from here towards Kansas, we enter the plains and the shortgrass prairies. And the shortgrass prairies and open plains are full of horned larks, and by the thousands. In some locations, you drive along some secondary roads and you'll flush horned larks every 50 feet. There can be massive flocks of them, especially if there's been inclement weather. Nevertheless, a beautiful bird. And we always, of course, keep an eye on the horned larks, looking for flocks of longspurs, for example. As we head out into the Great Plains and prairies, there's also a great area for raptors. Swainson's hawks have just started to return from their wintering quarters in South America. Also, ferruginous hawks are coming in. They usually arrive a bit later, so we don't see many of these in early April, but we can usually find one or two. These large hawks, of course, key in on prairie dog colonies. And that time of year, we get a nice overlap of the raptors that are coming north from the south and some of the raptors that have actually spent the winter in Colorado and are getting ready to head north. So oftentimes we can find 2 or 3 rough-legged hawks that are still present in Colorado. So great overlap of raptors. And it's not too difficult to find a great horned owl roosting or even nesting somewhere along the way. We then arrive in western Kansas, where we set up either in Garden City or Scott City. All depends a bit on which lek we will visit. The reason we go to Kansas now is because the lesser prairie chicken, endangered species, has declined in Colorado and is no longer easily or reliably seen. So we go to a new place in Kansas. We actually have a brand new spot now, which has really large numbers of lesser prairie chickens. So let me show you. So we head out to either a private ranch or a nature conservancy property. We set up in a blind very early in the morning, and we get fantastic close studies of these lesser prairie chickens. There are several leks on the property, up to 20 to 30 birds are present, so really large leks, and we really get to enjoy and watch them in detail and watch their unique dances. So here you can see one nicely displaying with his air sacs inflated. You can see it's a lesser prairie chicken. The air sac is more of a deep red color, not the same color as the comb, which is more orange. So that's a unique identification feature of the lesser prairie chicken. And this species, like I mentioned, has really declined. Its range is very small now, mainly found in New Mexico and the panhandle of Texas. And this Kansas has a good population of them. And interestingly enough, for a long time, nobody realized that there were lesser prairie chickens this far north in Kansas. And most of the time, ranchers just thought they maybe had greater prairie chickens. But it turns out the majority of these birds are lesser prairie chickens. And interestingly, a few greater prairie chickens show up here too. And oftentimes you can see them side by side for great comparisons. But let me show you really quick a display of a lesser prairie chicken here. And it's fantastic to watch. I'll turn up the volume. You'll hear a lot of camera shutters clicking. We are in a small blind here, very close to the activity. And there's a bit of a break in the picture taking. Maybe you can hear some of the booming, and they make a distinct clucking sound. And it's just a fantastic bird to watch. In many of the traditional lakes that people have gone to in Colorado, the birds were oftentimes much further away, but here we can see them very close. And that morning there were about 20 lesser prairie chickens present and one greater prairie chicken mixed in for great study, great comparison. So a really neat display here. And then after we enjoy a morning with the lesser prairie chickens, enjoying some of the prairie landscape, we head back to Colorado. We have 2 or 3 spots where we can look for the declining mountain plover. This has become a fairly rare species. It breeds in shortgrass prairie alongside prairie dogs and longspurs. And it can take a bit of time searching for this species. It blends in very well with this environment. But we can usually find one at 2 or 3 traditional sites. I know one year we went out to one of the spots where we can find them, and an ice storm rolled in, and we persisted, and we were able to find the birds really hunkered down. You can see the vegetation there is covered in ice, and even the birds had some ice on them as they hunkered down waiting out that storm. April weather in Colorado can be very cold, so it is important to come well prepared on this tour, and we usually always do. But even my camera, my scope, and everything in that ice storm was building up rim ice, so it was quite an interesting day to be out. But we were rewarded with many mountain plovers and thousands of longspurs that had dropped down during the bad weather. So talking about longspurs, the same site that usually has mountain plovers is also great to catch up with the beautiful chestnut-colored longspur, here a male in breeding plumage. And also McCown's longspur, here also male. We can usually see them by the hundreds and occasionally by the thousands, depending on each year. But we will get good views of them either sitting up or on the ground as they're just arriving into Colorado to set up their breeding territories. And then we will head back into Colorado to the small town of Ray, that's in the northeast portion of the state. And you can see in this aerial image here, you can see the fields there. Oftentimes that's corn, the green circles, interspersed with sort of native looking vegetation. And that's actually a sandy, hilly area that's not good for agriculture. So it has remained as native prairie. And it's really a stronghold for the greater prairie chicken. We go see greater prairie chickens on a private ranch, and that private ranch holds more than 100 leks of that species. So it's a great place to see it. And it is oftentimes one of the most popular leks of the entire tour. We use the vans as blinds here, so we're not in a blind, we're in the vehicle, and oftentimes are surrounded by many greater prairie chickens. And when we first get there in the morning, some of the males are still sort of standing around getting their bearings, but soon enough they'll start displaying. He's a beautiful male in full display. Also, just being there before sunrise and hearing the booming and then waiting for the sun to slowly come over the horizon, and then these birds take shape. It's just a fantastic experience. And then as they get fired up, as the morning goes along, as the males are displaying, they oftentimes go into these duels where 2 of them will size each other up and then really start grappling with each other in these sort of aerial battles. You can see some of them, 2 males fighting here. And then here are 2 males fighting in the snow. So some years there is snow on the ground, and this particular year was very cold. But nevertheless, the birds are really hardy, and they will come out and display anyway. Most interestingly, During mid-morning of that particular year, several of them flew up on the irrigation pipes that were kind of above the fields and were sitting out in the sun. That's the first time I had seen that. Sometimes they even will fly up onto the van and sit right on the van. And this lek right here holds up to 35 birds. So it's a really fantastic experience. Many close views, like this right here, beautiful male displaying in the snow right at sunrise. These birds will come to these traditional leks, and in this particular instance, this lek has been active for many, many, many years. They don't seem to be disturbed by our presence and are doing their fantastic behaviors. So here's a bit of a wider angle shot of what the lek actually looks like. You can see in the foreground there the 3 males, and right in the middle is a female looking to see which male she will pair up with. And of course, here's a brief video. There are actually some Native American dances that mimic the foot stomping of the greater prairie chickens. Very unique bird. There's some taxonomies that refer to this species now as pinnated grouse, but I think I do prefer this greater prairie chicken. And you can see the air sacs on the greater prairie chicken are orange, the same color as the comb, whereas the lesser prairie chicken was a much more redder color. And hopefully you can hear some of the booming and whooping calls and cackles that these birds are giving while they are displaying. And then we make our way back west towards the Rocky Mountains. So we will actually leave the short grass prairies and the plains behind us. Along the way, we can oftentimes see pronghorns, which are a native antelope, of course, to North America, and quite common on the short grass prairies. And then we have a longer drive. We head from the Ray area all the way to Silverthorne into the Rocky Mountains. It's a beautiful drive as soon as we enter the Rockies and weave our way up to the ski area of Silverthorne. And along the way, as we go up into the Rockies and some of the drier slopes, we can oftentimes see bighorn sheep too. So adding another fantastic mammal to the tour. So here you have an aerial photo of Silverthorne on the left there, and you can see Loveland Pass on the right. And that's our destination for the next morning. So we spend the night in Silverthorne, have an early dinner there, and then head out early to Loveland Pass. And Loveland Pass is the highest point that we reached during the tour, almost 12,000 feet in elevation. And some people say, yes, the Colorado tour can be a very cold tour, and it definitely holds true for Loveland Pass. Even on a sunny day, the temperatures can definitely be frigid, so we need to come prepared. And what we oftentimes do is we make short forays into the area where the bird that we're seeking is hanging out. And I will oftentimes go a little bit further up the pass and see whether I can locate the white-tailed ptarmigan, of course. That is the target here at Loveland Pass. It's a gorgeous bird, not easy to find. This time of year in early April, they're still in their immaculate non-breeding plumage, pure white, just sort of this black beady eye, a little bit of the red comb visible and the dark bill, of course. But they can be very difficult to find, especially if they're hunkered down in the snow. But so far we have had an excellent track record with 100% finding this species every time we go up there. Sometimes we find them fairly quickly, sometimes it takes quite a bit of searching. But once we can locate the white-tailed ptarmigan, we can oftentimes get fantastic views. It's not a shy bird, it's fairly approachable. Here you can see this bird is already getting a few grayish feathers around the neck of their breeding plumage. And here's just another image of a pair that we had just walking around in front of us, pretty much completely unconcerned and going about foraging. So just a really neat bird to find. And I would say of all the native grouse and chickens and quail that we look for on this tour, this is the most unpredictable one and the most difficult one, and always makes me the most nervous. But like I said, so far we've had exceptional luck every time and always had fantastic views. Here's just a short clip showing some of their behavior. You can see they prefer these areas where you get these small willows sticking up out of the snow and feeding on the willow buds. So those are good areas to look for when looking for ptarmigans up at Loveland Pass. And again, it can be very cold, especially if the wind picks up. So let me show you this next image here actually. Here is a happy group after seeing white-tailed ptarmigans. We're right at the top of Loveland Pass here. You can see the incredible mountain scenery in the background. There's still skiers and snowboarders up there in early April. And you can see everybody is really bundled up. This was a sunny day, but despite it being sunny and clear out, it was still very, very cold. But once we find the bird, we head straight back down to Silverthorne for a well-deserved breakfast and warming up and having some coffee. And soon enough, we're all warmed up and ready for more birds. So we actually spend a little bit more time around Silverthorne. We go a little bit west of the city into some of the forest at that elevation. And we'll get our first taste of Rocky Mountain birds. There will be many dark-eyed juncos around of different subspecies. Here is a gray-headed dark-eyed junco. We can also usually find pink-sided dark-eyed junco and Oregon dark-eyed junco. They oftentimes visit feeders. We'll see some widespread species like red-breasted nuthatch and a more typical western species like the pygmy nuthatch. There will also be plenty of mountain chickadees during our time in the Rocky Mountains. And at slightly different elevations, with sometimes actually overlapping the more widespread black-capped chickadee. We can usually find red crossbill somewhere along the tour. They're a bit nomadic and erratic, but we have enough stops in the proper habitat and enough feeder stops where we can usually find some. Sometimes we find lots of them, sometimes just a few. And usually around Silverthorne, for some reason, there's a good spot for merlins. Always seems to be a merlin hanging around in that area, possibly attracted by the flocks of finches and crossbills. You can also see red squirrels. That's a common mammal up in the forest of the Rocky Mountains. And one year we even got to the site that we visit where they have a feeder set up, and somebody said, oh, that was a strange looking squirrel. And yeah, it was not a squirrel, it was an American martin, which repeatedly kept coming back to the feeder setup to feed on birdseed. And that was definitely a first for the tour, and really welcome to see this uncommon mammal so well on the tour. And we can usually see up to 30 species of mammals overall, so it is great, not just for birds. After Silverthorne, we head south-west towards the Gunnison Basin. And as you can see from this aerial image here, the drive is just fantastic. We go across 2 passes, several big valleys, and really get a taste of the Rocky Mountains. And along the way, we make many birding stops, of course, and we go a bit on a woodpecker feast, seeing several species in quick succession. Here's the widespread hairy woodpecker. But we can also find red-naped sapsuckers, which are just returning during that time of the year. He's a beautiful male red-naped sapsucker. And then we have a great place to see Lewis's woodpecker, real western US specialty. Just a gorgeous woodpecker, beautiful colors, behaves very unlike most other woodpeckers, and flying around, fly catching, and it's just a stunning bird. And we got a couple of great spots to find it. And then as we head back up to one of the passes to higher elevation into the coniferous forest, we will look for the uncommon American three-toed woodpecker. And Colorado is a great place to find this bird. Of all the places I've been to, Colorado might be one of the easier spots to come to grips with this particular species. Beautiful male here with the yellow forehead. And then we also make a dedicated search for the nomadic pinyon jay, which sometimes can be difficult to pin down because they do move around depending on crops of their favorite food. But we have some locations where they're fairly reliable, sometimes in small flocks, sometimes in large flocks, but a beautiful powder blue jay. And to stick with the theme of blue, that area also usually holds several mountain bluebirds, another stunning western species. And then we reach Gunnison, small town set in the Gunnison Basin, and lies in it's a dry basin, and it's basically high desert, a sagebrush desert, and it is the home to the largest population of the Gunnison sage-grouse. Endangered species, likely less than 2,000 left. Most of them found here in the Gunnison Basin. There's also a small population in Utah and a small population in another part of Colorado, but most of them are found here. It was recently split, well, recently I should say maybe about 20 years ago, but it was recognized as a distinct species from the greater sage-grouse. They do look quite different. They're smaller, their head plumes are thicker, and there are more of them, and the banding in the tail is very different. So this is one of the rarest species in North America that we look for here in the Gunnison Basin. And this is quite famous, or infamous, I should say, the large blind, sort of this large metal box, and we get in there very early. This is the earliest morning of the tour. In case you were wondering about times of this tour, so when we don't go to a lek, we usually start around 6 o'clock in the morning. On this particular morning, I believe we start around 4:30. So it is an early morning, but we now spend 2 nights in Gunnison, so it's actually more restful now and easier on everybody, because we will actually call that a day early after this early start. So in a way, the tour is even a bit more relaxed now, and we're able to add some interesting birds. But we do start early on this particular morning, and we go to the blind well before sunrise. We open the front viewing area here before sunrise, and then we wait. And here the entire group is sort of looking out at a distant ridge where a few Gunnison sage-grouse are displaying. So the last time I was there, last year, we had fantastic luck. We saw good numbers of sage-grouse, and some of them actually quite close. So if you see this image here, this is taken from the blind. The first time I went to this spot was many, many years ago. I mean, I'm thinking maybe even 12 years ago, or 14 years ago. And the sage-grouse were displaying right in the valley, right in the foreground there. They were still distant, but they were in this flat area. Now most of them have moved onto that ridge that's in the foreground there, and that slope, so that first slope you see going up, which is quite distant. You can still get good views in the scope. You can even make out the different field marks, but they can be sometimes tricky to spot. Give you an example. Here is something I digi-scoped. There are 2 birds in there, right on top of the ridge. You can see the rising sun hitting the tail feathers. But like I said, on our last visit, the birds had actually started moving closer again towards the blind, and we were able to get great views of a handful of females and several males displaying. So let me show you, this is a video here. It's hard to see, but in the middle of the video, there's a male standing completely still. Sort of you see this snow-free area there, and right above the snow-free area, one is standing. And up to the left, up on the slope there, you see a little dot moving. That is another male walking up the slope. So again, I digi-scoped this video. but in the actual scope you do get better views than that. And if it's really still, sometimes you can even hear them. But you can see that a male in the middle of this video is standing completely still. And now you can see in the upper frame there, in the upper part of the frame, you see the one bird walking across the open patch of snow. And then after that, we of course have a breakfast to warm up and re-energize, and then we head up to Crested Butte and the Crested Butte ski area, which is a fantastic place for winter finches. And of course, Colorado is a specialty place for rosy finches in particular. All three species are possible, and we usually find all three on the tour. Predominantly brown-capped rosy finch, which is the species that breeds in Colorado, that makes up 90% of the flocks of the rosy finches. And we also see many gray-crowned and oftentimes a handful of black rosy finches. So Colorado is a great spot to get all three of them and to be able to compare them. So in this image right here, you can see they're pretty much all brown-capped rosy finches, except one is different right there in the middle. That is a black rosy finch. And here you see a short clip of sort of what a feeder frenzy looks like. This was another fantastic year for them. There's quite a late cold snap, and it brought them down from high elevations. And that year we had many black rosy finches actually. Here you can see one in a slightly closer image. And like I said, we also usually get two subspecies of gray-crowned rosy finch. For some reason, the Crested Butte ski area is always a good place for red foxes. Usually as we go up there or come back down, we can find a red fox. Also oftentimes see coyotes. So another neat mammal for the tour. And then we go back to Gunnison. We spend another night there. So that's the only stop of the tour where we spend 2 nights. All the other stops are one-nighters. And then the next morning we head to the Black Canyon of the Gunnison National Park, which is just a beautiful area. And the main target here in terms of chickens is the Dusky Grouse, which this particular spot might be one of the easiest places in Colorado to see it. Here's a male standing out in a snowstorm. So this was one year where we had a lot of snow coming down, but we were still able to find the grouse and get great views. Other years you get even better views. Again, these grouse are fairly approachable once you can find them. And here we had one displaying right by the edge of the road, offering fantastic photo opportunities, and another neat display of behavior. The area is also great for raptors. On the cliffs of the canyon, of the gorge, you get nesting peregrine falcons, nesting prairie falcons, nesting golden eagles. And here you can see a young golden eagle is in a squabble with a territorial red-tailed hawk. But it's a great area for raptors in general. Also a good stop for fox sparrow. This is the slate-colored subspecies. Usually have just arrived on territory when we get there. And also, if we haven't seen them by then, it's a good spot for Clark's nutcracker, another sort of classic western mountain species that we definitely want to see on this tour, and we usually have good luck with it. Also many mammals around there, like this beautiful golden-mantled ground squirrel. And as we get into the mountains, we'll also start seeing more yellow-bellied marmots. And then we head further west to Grand Junction. On this image right here, you can see to the left of Grand Junction the red sandstones. That's Colorado National Monument, which we will visit the following morning. And I have another image here, sort of showing what's to the east of Grand Junction. See that green area? That's Grand Mesa. That is the most extensive area above 10,000 feet in Colorado. So it has a lot of neat boreal habitat. And weather and time permitting, and if anybody has interest or energy, we have the option of going up there in the evening to look for boreal owls. It is an extremely difficult species to find, especially that time of the year. because deep snows makes it very difficult to move around. And like I said, sometimes the road is actually not even open and we can't go. But conditions permitting, we can give it a try. It's possible to hear the birds, and with great luck, it's possible to get great views of it. By no means a guaranteed species on this tour, but for anybody that wants to try, we do have the option of going up to Grand Mesa one evening to look for boreal owls. The next morning, we actually have a slightly later start. We don't have a lek to visit. We head to Colorado National Monument, a beautiful area of sandstone and cliffs and many unique birds there. The chicken of the day will be the beautiful Gambel's quail, which we can find in this area. Prefers arid environments, so this we can often find half a dozen of these quail early in the morning. And then we go explore the National Monument, stopping at various viewpoints, taking in some of the other wildlife. And of course, as you can see, this is ideal habitat for canyon wrens. So we make an effort to see this bird. It's just a really unique species in terms of habitat and behavior with a beautiful song. This is also a great spot for juniper titmouse, a bit more of an uncommon species, but we can usually find it here and get great views. Also the best spot for the Woodhouse's scrub jay. So this was split fairly recently from the western scrub jay complex into Woodhouse's scrub jay and California scrub jay. And the National Monument here is a good stop for it. And now we can actually head just a bit further west and towards the border with Utah, and we're just barely getting into the habitat of the sagebrush sparrow. There's just enough sagebrush out there where a few pairs are breeding. So this is a really great bird to get on this tour. Very unique habitat, a beautiful sagebrush sparrow. And along the sparrow, we can also find nesting sage thrashers. So those are two great birds to add when we make just a small detour a bit further west into the right habitat. And then we finish the day by visiting Coal Canyon. This is an interesting area. It's quite beautiful, but it also is a protected area for mustangs or wild horses. And we can oftentimes see a few here. And it's the best spot for rock wren, which is not terribly common in that part of Colorado, surprisingly, but in this canyon we can usually find a pair or two. And we also look for the non-native chukar. This is an introduced species. It's native to the Himalayas, Middle East, but it does quite well here in this habitat, so these dry, rocky canyons, but it's not always easy to find. It can take quite a bit of searching. They do spend most of their time high up on the cliffs, hiding among rock boulders. It's not small, it's a fairly large bird, much larger than any of our native quail, but not easy to find. But sometimes you can get fantastic views, just like this one of a male right here. And then we head up to Craig, that's the northeastern portion of Colorado. And we look in particular for sharp-tailed grouse here. So this is our chicken for this particular location, the sharp-tailed grouse. And here's one of our groups. Again, this is a snowy, cold spring, and we're scanning these open expansive for sharp-tailed grouse, and we got lucky. We found 2 or 3 males displaying in the snow despite the conditions. One of the birds actually ended up flying up onto a telephone wire and just perching there for 30 minutes trying to get out of the snow. But we were able to nevertheless get great close views of the displaying birds here. Very similar to prairie-chickens in plumage, as you can see. They have these bluish or purplish air sacs. They even sometimes hybridize with prairie-chickens, but still quite distinct arrow marks on the underparts versus barring, and a different distribution, of course. So the sharp-tailed grouse also does a really neat display. This is also one of the few stops where we get song sparrows. Most people are a bit surprised that many of the sparrows have not arrived yet. But yes, in early April, migration has not quite started yet. Every once in a while, we get a few migrants trickling in Some years we even had gray flycatchers already, some of the other sparrows coming through. Occasionally a single broad-tailed hummingbird may have arrived already, but overall migration has not started. So any of these migrants or shorebirds in other parts of Colorado are bonuses. That's different for waterfowl, of course. Waterfowl is on the move in good numbers, and we get an excellent variety on this tour. The reason that we are not worried so much about these widespread migrants is because this time of year is much better for finches. For example, I already talked about the rosy finches and crossbills, but it's also a great time of year and a great place to catch up with evening grosbeaks. We do have a great place between Craig and Walden, our next destination, to look for evening grosbeaks. And if we haven't seen it by that, we also have some backup spots for the gorgeous pine grosbeak here, a unique Rocky Mountain subspecies. And as we move into northern Colorado towards the Walden area, wide open expanses, wild country, lots of prairie dog colonies and Wyoming ground squirrel colonies, which attract American badgers. And we can usually find at least one of these on the tour. Really large and neat animals. And this particular one was checking out ground squirrel colonies to see, looking for prey basically. And then we head to Walden, which really is set amidst spectacular mountains and a very, very empty landscape. Very pristine. We stay at a small local hotel. There's a really unique restaurant in town. One of the best places to finish this fantastic tour. And the next morning we head out to what I would say is equal to the greater prairie chicken display, and we go see the greater sage-grouse displaying on a traditional lek. And the landscape, the backdrop here is just beautiful. Here in this particular photo you can see it looks like 6 males and maybe a dozen females. They're clustered together, and the males are all displaying as the sun is coming up over the horizon. Just a wonderful experience to finish the tour with, and probably one of my favorite. And one year we counted more than 135 greater sage-grouse at once. Usually numbers are more like 70 to 80, but nevertheless just a spectacular experience. And here you can see a female just sort of walking through, and the males of course are in full display. Here's a stunning male sort of resting between doing its what I can describe as a popping display. And here's a better image of one in display. And you can see on the head there are only a few thinner plumes, whereas on a Gunnison sage-grouse there would be many more plumes and it would be much thicker. Also the banding in the tail is different. But here's a male greater sage-grouse in full display. And then I didn't get a chance to mention yet, in that particular area of Colorado we get to see the white-tailed prairie dog. We travel so much and cover so much of Colorado, more than locals even will get to see, that we actually go through the ranges of 3 different prairie dog species. We see the black-tailed prairie dog in the east, and then we see the Gunnison prairie dog in the Gunnison Basin, and then in western and northwestern Colorado we see the white-tailed prairie dog, adding to our mammal list. And then from Walden we make our way back to Denver, so that's the last day of the tour. And along the way, we can stop for a very special waterfowl, the Barrow's goldeneye, if we haven't seen it by then, to add to our fantastic waterfowl list. I wasn't even able to add all the ducks and gulls and some of the other interesting species, grebes, western Clark's grebes, that we see on this tour, because I wanted to keep it brief. But we do see a large variety of ducks, pretty much anything that can be expected in the central part of North America during that time of year. And then we make one last stop to look for one more special woodpecker along the tour, the Williamson sapsucker. There's a great place where usually pair is present, and here's a photo of a male. This was taken during the last tour last year, actually. So I hope you enjoyed it. You can leave questions or comments in the comment area. I would welcome some questions. I hope I was able to clarify a few things about this tour. So again, the mornings usually start between 4:30 the earliest, 6 some other mornings. We usually finish with fairly early dinner so we can get enough rest. Driving times can vary 4 to 6 hours per day. We do cover quite a bit of mileage, but that is definitely interrupted by beautiful landscapes, some birding stops, or well-earned naps for some folks. But overall, one of my favorite tours to lead, and I hope you'll be able to join us at some point in the future. So again, thank you for watching this. Thank you for joining. And I hope you got a better understanding of the Colorado tour and enjoyed some of the images of the birds that we get to see during this tour.